Hello and welcome. I think that's what you're supposed to say when the VSL starts, and I'm going to treat this as VSL starting. So we're
Yeah.
back.
Yay!
uh, d- don't fear. Webb is as excited as he normally is. This is about Pico Choa here, at least as close as you can get without there being something edible in the vicinity.
Well, yeah, there may be something edible pretty soon. I'm missing my dinner time.
Yeah, that's fair. We're gonna get Paul Rietzl and Shuhai going pretty soon here. We'll head on over to the match when we can. I'll get word of that. Until then, you get me and Webb ruminating about vintage. Webb, how do you think
Yeah,
the lodestone golem restriction has played out? It's kind of confusing.
it is. It's interesting. It opens up a bit of room. I mean, one of the dominating aspects of the workshop archetype was being able to assemble a clock plus a lock piece with via lodestone golem. And now with golem being limited down to one, I mean, the deck's much less consistent, and so I mean, that lowers its win percentage a bunch. So you also have a lot of other new decks that people are trying out, like Eldrazi, and we'll see how that ends up fitting in. Everyone's trying different shells of that. But it's kind of interesting. Like overall, I like the. I mean, I'm not sure how worse the workshop decks got. I mean, I do know it is a non-zero amount, but
Yeah, well, one of the things I find interesting about it is that workshops got weaker because Lodestone got restricted, but at the same time, we all of a sudden have all these Eldrazi on the scene, and it's not clear how that would have played out even if you could play four golems, because a lot of what the Eldrazi decks are doing, I think, are naturally good against workshop decks. So yes, Lodestone Golem punishes Thought Knot Seer and Reality Smasher. We actually saw that in your match, even though you ended up losing a really close game, and having four Lodestones would help, but cards like Eldrazi Displacer just I think are very good against workshops, and two mana lands like Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple also pretty good at fighting the battles that workshops trying to fight.
oh yeah, the uh, the Eldrazi deck can play almost as many multi-mana lands as the workshop deck, and they're arguably better since I mean they can cast other stuff also. So you're not limited to like just mono brown. You can play like Eldrazi or what like wastes plus white, or for example, like what Kai was playing. And yeah, it's interesting. The cards were around before, but just no one had started playing with them with enough frequency yet.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it was that the workshop restriction did push people to trying Eldrazi. But I think that even if Lodestone wasn't restricted, there's a good chance that some kind of Eldrazi deck would be good in the format. Eldrazi Displacer is just a really good card. That card specifically gives these decks, and I mean, you see it in standard, you see it in modern, and you see it here in vintage a lot more punch. There's also a Legacy Eldrazi deck, of course. If there's a constructed format, there's an Eldrazi deck. We've determined this. So I'm just interested to see where it goes from there. And the funny part is on the other side of that, playing a deck, these like mono white Eldrazi decks mean that creature removal is a lot better in Vintage than it used to be. I was trying to figure out a best way to beat Eldrazi, and I'm not saying I got there by any stretch, but I did build a deck with 6 Swords to Plowshares and a bunch of Lightning Bolts just because I figured, I'm playing against a bunch of creatures probably.
Yeah, Swords of Plowshares has gone way up in value, and I suspect that Oath of Druids also, just simply because it's naturally good against creature decks. Maybe stuff like Balance or yeah. I mean, Lightning Bolt is I mean, not nearly as good as Plow, but you may see some people start playing Path to Exile.
Yeah,
When,
I actually had 2 in my sideboard. So I wanted to go pretty deep. One thing about Oath though is the fact that a lot of the Eldrazi decks play Containment Priest and even Eldrazi Displacer make Oath a slightly more tenuous plan than it would be otherwise.
yeah, I mean, it's a bit different. I mean, Oath still has to deal with the normal hate cards that are in the environment, but given that you're oathing up creatures, you can also always do different stuff. Like uh, Auriok Salvagers, for example, doesn't really care about Displacer, but whereas Gristlebrand or I mean Emrakul does. Like, you could play other stuff like I don't know, Tidespout Tyrant, or anything that just does stuff that isn't required to attack.
Yeah, I wonder if even something like Blazing Archon could make a comeback.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
blast from the past, but a lot of the Eldrazi decks would have trouble dealing with it.
Holding back a horde of zombie tokens like
Yeah.
from back in the day.
So going back to the matchup that we're about to be facing, one of the things that I found interesting is going to be what does Shuhai do next trimester? So we here in VSL you pick your deck and you play it for 3 weeks. This is week 2 of 3. But for week 4, does Shuhai play Oath again? He's played Oath in the play-in. He played Oath in this week 1, and he won the Age of Vintage Championship with Oath. So does he run back Oath, knowing that people are going to assume he is? I guess I could ask the same of you. You've played workshops in a lot of your matches, so there's a good chance people have you pegged as a industrious fellow, always working out.
Certainly. I suspect that Shuhei has got a. I mean, there's a reasonable chance he'll run it back. I mean, given that it's like a lot of people who play like one specific deck in a format like Legacy, for example, and or like Affinity. Like take that. I mean, when we were testing for PT Nagoya, people would walk up after the rounds and say, "Man, I can't believe I lost to
Tempered
Tempered
steel.
Steel. I bring in 4 scrap melters. How is that not enough?" And
Yeah, people.
anytime you have experience with it, you just I mean laugh at the some of the hate that gets brought in. It's not too difficult to thread the needle if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, even if someone could predict that you were going to play a deck with workshops in it, or predict that Shuhai is going to play a deck with Forbidden Orchard in it, but they could still just lose to those decks, especially since you can juke a little bit. Like you mentioned, Shuhai's got Auriok Salvagers that gets around some of the hate cards. Like it gets first of all it gets around Eldrazi Displacer, and second of all it actually gets around Grafdigger's Cage because when there's an Oath of Druids and playing a Grafdigger's Cage and you Oath, you reveal cards until you reveal the creature, and then the creature just stays on top of your library. It can't come into play. Then you just draw
Yeah.
the Salvagers, play the Salvagers. There's no prohibition to grabbing an artifact out of your graveyard, and you can actually just go off still.
Yeah, you're basically demonic tutoring for your Lotus and Spellbomb, and then you've just vamped for Salvagers, and it's very
Yeah.
easily to cast at just 4 mana, which is nice.
Yeah, actually, at the Eternal Weekend last year, I played an Oath deck, and my sideboard plan against Workshops was to board in 4 Ingot Chewers, because if they bring in Grafdigger's Cage, I can just Oath into Ingot Chewer and then just draw Ingot Chewer. So it was pretty sweet. Then I, of course, didn't play against Workshops, but hey, I still like the plan.
Yeah, you probably would have played against Workshops if you had stayed in a few more rounds.
Yeah, it turned out that let's just say Vintage is very popular, so I ended up having to leave before the tournament concluded.
Uh, I'm sure it was a blast to play over there.
Looks like players are ready. Let's just see if we're going to be able to head down to the match point yet. All right,
Yeah.
we're gonna head down momentarily. The players are ready. Paul and Shu have been staring at their opening hands for like 10 minutes now. They're probably think they have all the lines planned out. So we're gonna be heading down there momentarily, but and then we're gonna see Paul Rietzl battle against Shuhei Nakamura here.
It'll be an
The,
epic match for sure.
the match we've all been waiting for, literally.
Yeah. Yes, all of us.
All right, let's head down. Alrighty. Looks like we've got some opening hands here with Paul on the play, and
I
all
don't
right.
see Shuhei's hand completely. I do see Forbidden Orchard though.
Yeah, we
Oh, wait,
shocker.
oh,
Shuhei has an Oath and a Mox.
yeah.
I was actually more curious what the other 4 cards were going to be, because we knew about the Orchard, the Oath, and the Mox, and we have to figure out what else Shuhei's got going on here. Um,
Man.
Paul does get to play a turn one time walk here, since he's got Minamo School at Water's Edge, and he's got a Chrome Mox.
Yeah, he really wants a seat at the Synod. He's so close to having a pretty busted hand, and he really wants to draw a land on his next turn so he could play the Trinisphere. Otherwise, he's going to be in some deep trouble when Shuhei gets to have his signature turn one play.
Yeah, Paul. So Paul Paul is 1 mana away from having a turn 1 Trinisphere, essentially, because Shuhei hasn't taken a turn yet. He just needs to draw any land or any 0 mana artifact, or some of the 1 mana artifacts, depending on what they are. So this is a big draw step for Paul, because Mox Opal's at 2 out of 3 here. Can I interest you in a 5 mana artifact?
If he had been playing with a memory jar from Urza's Legacy, I think that probably would have been the bottom of the deck, and he would have drawn
Yeah.
like a Seed of the Synod. But Shuhei gets to triple up with his Forbidden Orchards, and this Oath of Druids is gonna be pretty difficult for Paul to deal with, since he doesn't actually have any cards in his hand.
Yeah, Paul's hand is 3 uncastable spells and a 0 mana artifact with no abilities. Oh,
Hold
Panoptic
on. You spoke too soon.
I was trying to figure out what Paul's good draws were and what his bad draws were, and somehow he ended up with a draw worse than any bad draw I could imagine. It's just a highly uncastable card, which is not what Paul's looking for right now.
That's kind of what this deck is, though. I mean, it's kind of like a Ram deck in the sense that, he just drew all his Primeval Titans, but no Ram spells to go along with it. Unfortunately, the clock on how effective his draw will be was too small for him to draw out of it.
So Shuhei did hit the Salvagers and does have Paul looks, sees Black Lotus, and is ready to call it.
Yeah. So that was a very quick game, and Shuhei is going to be reaching for a lot of cards out of his sideboard, and not as many as Paul maybe, but Paul has got a lot of hate also.
Yeah.
Force Will and Grafdigger's Cage.
Paul does get to bring Force Will, which is good against the typical Shuhei opening, but Shuhei is ready to. I mean, his deck is set up against basically the base blue deck that Paul has, and Ancient Grudge does make it a lot easier on Shuhei, because Paul's mana base is really dependent on having a lot of artifacts in play. You can strand Mox Opal pretty easily with Ancient Grudge.
Yeah, and the engineered explosives are going to double up against cage removal, so it's going to be it won't be too difficult for Shuhei to draw into some way to make it so that he can Oath if one of them is resolved.
Yeah, and actually, Shuhei's in a spot where he's got so many good cards that he's not even. It looks like he might not even have Pyroblast or Flusterstorm in his deck. He's just got too many good options.
Yeah, like not bringing in Flusterstorm for the blue mirror. Although Paul's deck is probably the farthest away from a traditional blue deck that you can get. But leaving those cards in the sideboard is just pretty amazing. So we get to see Paul on the play for game 2 again. And hopefully we get a more of an exciting game for this one. Well, we're starting off some excited lands.
Oh wow, Paul's hand is awesome.
Yeah,
he gets to start with Sapphire into Key, and then has a Academy that taps for 2 mana, double cantrip plus Tezzeret. This looks like a Melcher deck.
Yeah, pretty much. And it looks like Shuhei's got a Force of Will to defend against Paul's shenanigans, but Paul being able to hold back his force in response is going to make it so that he gets to resolve all his spells, which was probably going to be a Tezzeret, given that he's got the Voltaic Key. He's going to have to try and get a Time Vault before Shuhei gets one of his Ancient Grudges.
Yeah, and Tezzeret, of course, can get Time Vault, as you said, and then get extra turns very quickly. Ooh. Seed of the Synod. That's like a blue Ancient Tomb.
Yeah, very jealous now. He's got more. This is like the double mana land week. Like everyone's playing with double mana lands. You got Ancient Tombs and.
Oh, look, I'm just sitting over here with my snow-covered islands and snow-covered plains.
Snow-covered lands are awesome. I mean, there are multiple people who would not really hold it against you to play those lands. I certainly have got a stack lying at home, just waiting to be used when they're legal.
Yeah.
So it looks like Paul is going to draw that transmute artifact. What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, he left Seed of the Synod on top, so next turn he can play Seed of the Synod, tap Academy for 3, cast Transmute Artifact, sacking one of his zeros, and that lets him get a time vault, then pay the 2 difference because that's what transmute does. It lets you. It's essentially Tinker, but you have to pay the mana cost difference, and then he can just has a turn 2 win with Force of Will backup. So Shuhei needs to find. It can't even be Mental Misstep. He needs to find the actual Force of Will here, or we're gonna find a game 3.
Yeah, let's see. Could he find something else maybe, or is it just Force of Will? Like maybe if he doesn't have any mana left over, so Lotus wouldn't really do anything. So yeah, just Force of Will. It's sort of difficult to identify that from like Paul's board. I mean, Paul, Tolarian Academy is pretty threatening, but like, if you were to be preordaining into like a Force of Will and like note the Druids, it'd be, or I guess maybe not preordained, but something where you can only keep one card. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to not keep both with, especially when having Orchard and Force in your hand already.
And so Paul deciding which 0 mana artifact he wants to sacrifice here. Looks like he's gonna go with the Mox Sapphire.
Yeah, the Mox at least lets you hedge against not being as vulnerable to explosives, but
Yeah.
it's not too much of a deal here.
So Shuhei's gonna play his Force of Will here because Transmute does end the game, and then Paul is presumably going to Force of Will back. We're gonna see a Time Vault. We're gonna see another turn, and we're gonna see a game 3.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. We've got infinite mana versus infinite turns, and unfortunately, just not infinite games. This is. I was hoping for a much more exciting match. Although, I mean, these first few turns have been pretty powerful. Just not nearly as like everyone throwing draw spells at each other and just like all sorts of intricate plays.
Yeah, these aren't the most interactive games, but a pair of turn 2 kills. I mean, these decks are just doing what they're designed to do, and vintage decks do that sometime. On the other hand, you've got games like yours and Kai Reed's, or mine and Rich Jay's, where we were like throwing removal spells at each other. There's double blocks, triple blocks, quadruple blocks, and you end up just in a spot where it looks a lot more like a game of Standard than it does a game of Vintage.
Yeah, and so we're going to be going on to that third game now, and we'll see which format we end up playing.
Well, the way these decks are constructed, it's difficult to have too long of a game just because both decks are so fast. But I wouldn't be surprised. Well, Shuhei brought in Ray of Revelation. Interesting. I was wondering what white card he had there. And I guess it's Ray of Revelation. Huh.
Maybe I'm not sure if Paul has any enchantments in his sideboard.
Take a look at the deck list here because we've got a deck list. Yeah, I guess I don't know. We'll have to ask Shuhei later.
There's nothing in there.
Paul's hand is nice. I'm excited for this one, and Shuhei's hand's got a Gristlebrand, so I don't know that Shuhei might actually mulligan this hand because he has turn 1 Time Walk and a Mental Misstep, but Jace, you can't cast Jace on turn 2 unless he has another.
It looks like he's got a land, a library.
Oh, interesting. Library of Alexandria does change this quite a bit because now Shuhei can go turn 1 library, go, can't activate, he has 6 cards in hand. Then if Paul doesn't force him to do anything, Shuhei can go turn 2 library up to 8, and then he can go, if he draw to 7, library to 8, he can play Landmark's Time Walk. Oh, that puts him to 5 though, but then he can just still play a turn 2 Jace if he's drawn a land. So turn 2 Jace is not bad, but I think Paul has other plans.
Yeah, Paul has lots of plans. Oh man, and he drew a Thoughtcast, so he doesn't need to cash in that library just yet, or that with that wheel rather.
One of the risks of casting Wheel of Fortune is actually that Shuhei gets to go up to 7 cards in hand and use library right away.
Yeah, and the punishing thing about library in this situation is like Paul's going to cast full take key here. So what does Shuhei do? I mean, is he going to time walk himself?
Yeah, if Shuhei casts Mental Misstep on key, Shuhei can't activate library on his turn. On the other hand, if he doesn't, he just puts himself vulnerable to a Time Bolt. Like Shuhei's actually just straight up dead to Time Bolt or Transmute Artifact here, assuming Paul has a land.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. But I mean, having the Jason in his hand makes it so that he's got at least a reasonable like alternate route, especially if he draws a second land. You can just go land, time walk, land mox, Jace, and that'll at least be a little bit more productive.
Yeah, it looks like Shuhei's not going to take the risk here.
Yeah, yeah, I would bite the bullet here. Also, that's a tough spot to be in.
So Paul has an interesting play here. He can actually announce Thoughtcast and sack Lotus to pay for it, so that way he can cast Dak Faden afterward if you want. Because by casting Thoughtcast like this, he can't actually cast Dak Faden this turn. Well, he can now that he has drawn a Mox Opal, but that's just a kind of a funny little play. I'm not actually like that into casting Wheel of Fortune against an opponent with a library and 5 cards in hand.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would rather just do a bunch of stuff and then play wheel.
Especially with Dak in play, you could just you could play like Paul could play Dak this turn and then just start using that. It looks like he's actually just going to pass.
Yeah, I mean, Dak by itself is like half of a draw 7.
Yeah, I mean, +1, see two new cards. Next turn, see 2 new cards. You're already seeing 4 cards. All right, Shui. This is on Shui. He drew the Force of Will, which is actually not. It's not optimal in the sense that he can't protect Jace with it because he's going to have to play the Jace. But if he draws a land here, he can slam Jace. It needs to be a blue producing land, though. Yeah, there we have it.
I can't see what the artifact is next to the Crystal Brand in his hand. Is that a Time Vault?
It's a Mox Pearl.
Mox
So,
Pearl, okay.
yeah, Shui's going to play the Pearl. He's going to play Jace. It's going to resolve because we know Paul's hand. And now that Shui has a Jason play, I'm actually a little more interested in wheeling because I'm just falling so far behind.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. So Shuhei's probably going to brainstorm here, hope to find a blue card.
If Shui finds a blue card, he's in good shape.
Yeah. Though, I mean, Paul does have 2 draw 7s technically, so if he gets one of like his Wheel Force, then he'll still have some game. Oh
wow, Shui did not find a blue card, so he's got Oath. He's 1 mana short of casting it, and that means Paul has open season here. Oh wow, Paul found his own library. Now I'm like kind of into just going. Wow, it's close. Library. You could play library and just cast Wheel of Fortune.
yeah, you could do that. I do like. I mean, do you think you can take a turn off, just play
Dak Steal the Pearl?
Yeah, Dak Steal Pearl. Or that's so tough though, like just passing with another Jace. You can just do both.
Yeah, I like Paul's play here. I would just be tempted to cast Wheel.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, Shuhei was not anticipating Wheel of Fortune. He has his two good cards in hand, the Oath and the Force, and he has a Gristlebrand on top.
Well, he drew into a pretty into a hand that can put up a bit of a fight. I mean, he's got Force of Will, Mental Misstep, and his own Dak Faden, which, I mean, they're all castable. So we're gonna see some fireworks here.
Yeah, Paul's a little light on action, but he does have first of all library going, and he has double Grafdigger's Cage.
Yeah, and Dak is pretty good at dealing with artifacts, except for Grafdigger's Cage in this situation. Doesn't really matter who controls the cage. I mean, everyone's contained in it.
It's a cage match. The funny thing is, though, Grafdigger's Cage is not actually that relevant to what's going on right now. Shuhei's winning with Jace. He's not winning with Oath of Druids. So I think that Paul has to be feeling a lot of pressure. And in fact, I think Paul's significantly behind. Just the fact that they both have library, but Shuhei has Jace and Paul has 4 lands and 2 cages in hand. So he really needs that Thirst for Knowledge to be good.
Yeah, and Paul does have Strip Mine, but it's Jace versus one-time Thirst for Knowledge. So, I mean, Shuhei's a bit ahead, like you said. Yeah, it's going to be on Paul to really draw well from this point. Yeah, looks like Paul's going to start deploying his cages, which Shuhei can deal with all of them if he wants to.
See, Shuhei didn't even choose to Mental Misstep it. I think he's just so off the Oath plan right now, and figures that once he gets to the point where he wants to Oath, he can try to find enough removal for the cages. He can just use Jace and win the game that way.
Yeah, he's just going to try and bury Paul with a bunch of card advantage. And he's going to be able to library now, and he's going to see so many new cards. I suspect that Grisselbrand might be hardcast this game, which would
There,
be
there,
awesome.
there's a chance of that. Black Lotus, and then I guess another Black Source. So it's pretty difficult.
Yeah, probably by stealing a Mox Opal, that would be the best. It looks like Dak Faden is going to go after Black Lotus, which I don't think Paul will allow to happen.
That actually works out all right for Paul. He gets to spend the mana. I bet you I did not count on Paul being able to spend the mana here.
Yeah. Being able to thirst for knowledge into hopefully 3 gas spells is what Paul is trying to do. Maybe some of the spells that he had in his hand during game 2. So, not really sure what happened here, but I'm going to off camera.
All right, so
There we go. All right, so it looks like Paul has cast Thirst for Knowledge, drew into Brainstorm, Transmute, and Gitaxian Probe. And Shuhei's turn, and he just drew into another Force of Will, and Ancient Grudge, or brainstormed into a Force of Will, Ancient Grudge, and Flooded Strand.
the funny thing is, had Shuhei been able to see Paul's hand, he would have probably Force of Willed that Thirst for Knowledge. Because Paul's hand at that point was a Grafdigger's Cage of like 6 lands. But given what Shuhei saw, it actually makes sense not to.
Yeah, and even taking the line that Shuhei did, he's still in pretty good shape. I mean, just look at his hand; it's got all sorts of stuff. And so, if you're Paul, how do you think you attack this turn? I mean, you've got to deal with 2 planeswalkers, a library, like 7 cards, and your
Yeah,
hand is like pretty weak.
I think Paul needs to. I mean, he still needs to cast his draw spells. He knows about at least one of the Force Wills and the Mental Missteps, so he's not optimistic about his cards resolving. You're certainly in a library, and I think there's a good chance you also want to strip mine the opposing library. Those seem like the good places to start, but yeah, you're really behind against these 2 planeswalkers.
Yeah, that brainstorm. You can lead off with a probe and just see what he's dealing with, and see the good news.
Yeah. It's not clear if Shuhei wants to mental misstep the Gitaxian Pro, but he declined to last time, which makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, even though you're revealing your hand, so Paul knows what he has to play around. I mean, Shuhei's got so much, and I would rather save his misstep for something like a Pyroblast or a Voltaic Key. Let's see, depending on what Paul has. Let's see what he boards in. Let's see. He could have like I don't know, like another Voltaic Key. That would be better.
This kind of game is my favorite from like the Oath side, where your opponent draws their sideboard card and just actively doesn't do anything.
That's one of the nice things about these.
Or I guess passively
Planeswalker heavy
ones.
Yeah.
Paul picked up a Mox Emerald, which not the most exciting.
No. So given that Paul saw Shuhei's hand and saw that Shuhei declined to mental missteps, or I guess Ancient Grudge, Grafdigger's Cage, it's going to be. Paul knows that Shuhei is going to be saving all of his removal for different stuff, so like trying to bait with the Grafdigger's Cage in his hand isn't really going to do anything. So he's got him pretty well covered. I mean, that brainstorm is going to get dealt with by the mental misstep maybe, and then you have both Force of Wills to deal with Transmute.
I imagine that Shuhei is gonna mental misstep a brainstorm. It's so hard to not do that when your opponent has 8 cards, 9 cards in their hand. Like it's basically just Ancestral Recall.
Yeah, pretty much.
So Paul, this gets him closer to 7 cards. I mean, he can easily play down to 7 cards here, and I think he's hoping that Shuhei would mental misstep that.
Yeah, Shuhei's not taking the bait. Oh, there's some more mana. Not too much far away from Blightsteel Colossus.
No, I mean Tolarian Academy is awesome. It taps for what 5, 6 mana right now, but Paul's long on mana and short on action, so I don't think that's really what he's looking for. He can hope a Transmute Artifact resolves, but he knows it's not going to.
Yeah, especially if he plays the Academy.
Yeah.
Uh,
This is a desperation brainstorm here.
yeah, let's see if.
Oh wow, Shohei let it resolve, and Paul still has more lands. At this point, Paul would rather transmute resolve so he can shuffle more than anything else, but I don't think. Again, he knows that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's gonna be like really tough now.
Paul needs like a Banefire or something, some uncounterable X spell. Then he would be in great shape.
Yeah, that would be the. Oh, he drew a Flusterstorm, but
Oh,
that's not really.
Yeah, it stops one force of will. I guess it's not bad, but Paul needed to hit more than that.
Yeah, you need to hit some a few more action spells.
Paul needs a Mind's Desire. That would be great.
Yeah, I think the original list used to play stuff like that that had more draw sevens, like Time Twister, but not in this build. In any case, you can see that. Let's see. Paul is casting Transmute Artifact, and let's see, what is he going to sacrifice? Or is it on the stack? Yes, it is on the stack. He's casting it. Yeah, you don't actually. Oh,
He let it
resolves.
resolve. So Shuhei is just like off of countering anything. This is kind of interesting. Paul can't remember because of the Grafdigger's Cage. Paul can't get a creature here.
Yeah.
But he, I guess
Actually-
Shuhei figures that like with Time Vault, Shuhei can just counter the key, or with key, Shuhei can just counter the Time Vault. So Paul has to get a business card that doesn't require another spell to resolve, and he has to fade Ancient Grudge next turn. So this is actually Paul doesn't actually have great options here.
I'm kind of curious as to whether or not, or how Transmute interacts with Grafdigger's Cage and getting a creature. Like, do you, when you sacrifice?
If you get a creature, it won't come into play. Like you
Okay.
could have, Paul could have sacrificed the Grafdigger's Cage and then gotten a creature, but he would need to not get a creature otherwise.
I thought you sacrificed the artifact as part of the resolution. Maybe not. I haven't read.
Oh, it resolved. So he chose. I think he already chose to sacrifice. Let me take a look at Transmute Artifact. But Paul doesn't actually have a creature apparently. So
He's got a Trinisphere, which will be sort of I mean, just in effect,
Yeah,
that's just a shuffle effect.
it's part of the resolution of the spell. It's not an additional cost. So Paul could have chosen to sacrifice Cage. Paul got a Trinisphere, which is gonna make it so Shuhei can't tap out and have Force of Will up, but it's not potential. It's not really doing much right now.
Yeah, and Shu has the Ancient Grudge if he wants to play it on like Grafdigger's Cage and then on Trinisphere, which would take most of his mana. I mean, he's probably pretty content just using both of his library, both of his planeswalkers, and like playing a land.
So Shuhei's got 8 mana, so he can play 2 spells into Trinisphere and still use library here. Actually, looking at Paul's deck post board, I don't think he's got Mirror Battlesphere in his deck. And Mirror Battlesphere would have been okay, but Ancient Grudge killing the Battlesphere, and then you could like flashback Grudge on a token, Jace bounce a token, and I guess that's still pretty good.
Yeah, it would get rid of deal some threats, but and Shuhei still has like, a lot of cards. It looks like he's gonna
Yeah,
deck.
I'm afraid this game is actually very close to as over as the other ones. It's just going to take a little longer. Shuhei's outnumbering Paul 3-1 on the Planeswalker side, and Paul's got a Trinisphere and like a million mana.
Yeah. So what Paul needs to have happen is basically draw an action this turn, preferably like Ancestral Recall, and have Shuhei just tap down so that he can't cast multiple counters under the Trinisphere.
I think it's pretty great how Shu has just let everything resolved. He's just like, all right, yeah, you can resolve Brainstorm, you can resolve Transmute Artifact, and then just like sits there on all his counters, and none of those cards actually did anything.
Yeah, when everything is said and done, like, there aren't too many threats or actual threats there. I've got Planeswalkers and that say draw on them, and so I'm going to deal with your actual threats later on. Although this Flusterstorm could be like okay, but yeah, having ending the game with like 2 Force of Wills plus one that you drew later, plus an Ancient Grudge, plus a Misstep is kind of nice.
The one thing Paul's got going for him is that library.
Oh yeah, he's definitely using it for all it's worth, and he's gonna see Shuhei's hand, and it'll be interesting to see what he does afterwards. But he'll fight the good fight, I suspect, for showmanship.
I would not blame Paul for conceding here. Seeing 3 Force of Wills, Dig Through Time, Mental Misstep, Preordain, and of course an Ancient Grudge is not the most motivating thing you could possibly see. With a library, which Paul can actually strip mine.
Yeah.
So Time Walk is essentially a draw to because it lets Paul use library again. I wouldn't be too surprised if Shuhei decided he wanted to cast Force of Will on this. But he hasn't forced anything so far, so
yeah, it'll be kind of interesting. You might even see something like Library, Grudge, or Grudge Trinisphere, and then like Force of Will alternate cast. But no, just everything's resolving.
Paul deciding whether to use strip mine. Who's taking out Volcanic? He's just trying to strand the Grudge in Shuhei's hand.
Yeah, and this is gonna force a response out of Shuhei, I suspect. Nope, didn't even tap it for mana.
Shuhei's trying to win this game without casting any cards. I think he's actually decided the game would be too easy if he played the cards from his hand. So
it's only fair.
I think it's that he just doesn't want to Grudge Trinisphere or Grafdigger's Cage, so he's just ready to just wait and figure he'll find a red source later. He can also, I guess with a Grafdigger's Cage in play, it doesn't work, but you could Dack Fade and Grudge into your graveyard. You just can't flash it back while Cage is still around.
Yeah.
Paul found a Thought Cast, and another draw two. Does Shuhei counter this draw two? At some point you counter a draw two, right? Or you just never?
Seems like he just never. I mean, given that a draw two is better than a draw one, so we'll see if this prompts a response. But Shuhei has to be careful against that Flusterstorm. I don't think he knows about that. So, and if he decides to hardcast Force of Will, which I suspect he would not, then he wouldn't be able to counter anything else. He looks like he just let that one resolve, and Paul drew a Volcanic Island and something else.
It looks like he just let that one resolve. The Shuhei Nakamura story.
Time Vault, huh? Well, unfortunately, Paul can't use Time Vault very well at the moment, and so he'll have to keep it in his hand. Otherwise, Dack Fade will probably steal it, or it'll get Ancient Grudge if Shuhei can find another red source, or just discard the Grudge because he's got so many cards in his hand.
Yeah, but Cage does stop that one still. So.
Yeah, there is that.
But Paul can't really just run out the Time Vault, like you said, because Dack Faden is just ready and waiting. I guess Paul's just going to go for it. Well, it does deal with the Dack Faden. It's not like Shuhei can untap the Time Vault.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to turn into a Vindicate, and that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Did we give him... Shuhei cracked. Looks like he's going to cast Force of Will. He's going to have to pay 3 and exile a card here.
Yeah, the cheapest of Force of Wills.
Yeah. It's a cancel that makes you discard or exile a card and lose a life.
Yeah. So at this point, if you're Shuhei, what do you think his game plan is? Besides just drawing all the cards?
Just keep activating Jace.
Yeah.
All right, Paul's gonna fluster. You know, Shuhei could just let this happen, let the time vault resolve, and then DAC because Paul doesn't have. Paul has to obey Trinisphere as well, and right now, at least from Shuai's point of view, Paul doesn't have enough mana to do anything else. Paul can actually play Minamo School at Water's Edge, untap Tolarian Academy, just has nothing to do with that mana.
Yeah. Well, by doing that, it would be pretty good for him. But yeah, not having to do anything afterwards as a follow up is unfortunate. You'd probably see a dig from time otherwise, but that minimo is going to be a little like. I guess if Shuhei sees that Paul has enough mana to counter back, he's not just going to run out the dig through time. Oh. Looks like Shuhei was about to cast dig through time there, but stopped because it was still in Paul's main phase. Just gonna wait.
Well, no, I think he was deciding whether he wanted to force a one or not because he saw the life getting paid.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, well, there's the red source. Forbidden Orchard will supply Shuhei with red, but he actually has to. Yeah, the token is kind of annoying here. Shuhei could also just take the Time Vault with Dak Faden. He could also Jace to try to find a non-Orchard red source. Shuai's got a lot of options here.
Yeah, I would start by. Let's see. If you go library and then play. I mean, you can always use Jace to bounce the token if you really want to.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, it is basically trading a card away. And library found another Forbidden Orchard, so...
So, again, Julius just has to figure out how not to lose. This is the kind of game. He doesn't know what Paul... Like, Paul's had Gitaxian probes, so he knows a lot of what Shuai's got going. But Shuai's got a lot... He doesn't have as much knowledge of Paul's hand. Paul has 6 cards in hand. It could be anything. So, Shuai's got to figure out kind of like what he's going to possibly lose to. And with a Trinisphere in play, it does get a lot more dangerous because all of a sudden Shuai can cast 2 spells a turn instead of 4. But the fact that Paul just has 6 blanks in hand means that Shuai's going to play conservatively. He's going to try to figure out how not to lose. Paul's just not going to be able to present enough threats.
Yeah, and playing conservatively is going to lead into just drawing a ton more cards, which is what he kind of wants to do. I mean, one thing he could do is just steal the Time Vault if he wants to. Or just like plus stack one more time and then steal the Time Vault because his hand's just so loaded. And it's not going to be too long before he finds an engineered explosives to kill out or clean out all those Grafters cages if he really wants to do that. Ooh, Ancestral Recall.
Oh, good. Shuai gets to draw more cards. All right, now we've begun. Shuhei is fate sealing Paul, and that's the beginning of the end. Jace Ultimate, I think, maybe where we're going here.
Yeah. When the fate sealing starts, it's usually a pretty good sign that the game has reached that part of it being concluded. Although for Paul's credit, he did do a pretty good job at fighting this battle.
Yeah. You know, in week 1 when I was playing as Ryan Kelly and he had a Jason play for 2 turns, I conceded, and I bet the commentators were like, "Wow, I was surprised that he conceded there, but this is why." Look, this game is going to be tough for Paul to win. I'm not saying it's 0%, but if you were to account for rounding errors, it's basically that.
Yeah, it's as close to 0 as you can get without it being actual 0. There are some lines where Paul might have a chance at winning, but it's Shuhei is just sort of cleaning up in a very orderly fashion. Just going to see this car wreck in slow motion. So Paul is continuing to power up his Academy, which can currently produce 9 mana.
And with Minamo School Water's Edge, that's like another 7 mana or 8 mana. So that's a lot of again, if Paul had a Banefire in his deck, he could win this game very easily.
Yes.
So Shuhei can just cast end of turn dig. Shuhei, yeah, he can't. He doesn't have to worry about being decked.
At various points in the game, I checked to see how many cards he had left in his deck, but it looks like he's got high 20s, which is more than enough. It's like at least 3 turns.
Oh, sure, just tapping out to dig through time. He's not worried about a counterspell.
Yeah, it's like, please counter this. I have Dak, Chase, Ancestral, and I'm more than happy trading 1 for 1. And so Shuhei taking some time to consider his options. He's got a lot of stuff going on, so just decides how exactly he wants to finish this game off. And it looks like it's going to be Engineered Explosives and Mindbreak Trap.
Engine Explosives currently is a little weird to play because of the Trinisphere, since that messes with the Sunburst.
Yeah, he's...
But with a Soul Ring in play, Shuhei can make it for every color, or he can make it as colorless as we want. So he can play it for 1 if he wants to kill the 2 cages. He can play it for 3. That will kill Doc Faden though, so that's not great.
Yeah, I suspect it's going to be for 1, and I mean, he loses Soul Ring, but
Ooh, a Mindbreak Trap, just in case Paul ever draws multiple spells in the same game. Actually, that's Shuhei's out. He no longer loses to Banefire. Mindbreak Trap can just exile the spell off the stack.
yeah.
We did it.
He is a master. He has all of the angles covered.
Shuhei is part of one of the most amazing stats I've ever heard in my entire life related to Magic, which was that as of last year, mid last year, or early last year, he had played in 38% of all Grand Prix. Not all Grand Prix in a certain time period, or 38% of all Grand Prix not held in the same weekend. He had played in 38% of all Grand Prix. So that is something.
Oh yeah, he's got a million Planeswalker points.
I mean, I don't know how long it takes to play in 38% of all Grand Prix. Like, I assume almost as long as this match, but it's still like a really long time. Paul has drawn a kill condition. He's drawn a key, which Shuhei has currently 3 answers to, 4 answers to, 5 answers to.
He's probably just gonna bide his time. I mean, he's not gonna run that into a bunch of open mana, especially given that he's seen his hand with multiple times with Gataxian Probe. But just passing the turn and against Library Jace, Dak is kind of rough. Although only one of them is drawing cards at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Jace is just ticking up and Shuhei is not even casting his Ancestral means that this game will come to a conclusion fairly quickly, because Jace Ultimate is only a couple turns away.
Yeah, Paul's gonna have to play those out sometime. I mean, otherwise, Jace Ultimate is gonna be kind of rough. You can even use Dak Faden to make
Oh yeah.
him draw cards, speed up the process. Ancestral U, Dak U.
Shuhei casting what is it, a Tooth of Ramos or something, the whatever the 3-mana tap for a blue card is from Mercadian Masks, without even the sacrifice ability. So
I
it's
have
like,
Ramos.
oh, that one's the eye. Yeah, of course you would know that.
Yeah. That was one of the playable ones.
Yeah.
Although it would have been, it should have been heart because that's what Paul has.
Yeah, Paul does have a lot of heart here.
Slogging through.
So what Paul's trying to do here is he's got the key. He knows if he resolves it and Shuhei doesn't have a grudge, he wins. What I think might happen is Paul just goes for it with force backup, but he just knows that's just not going to work.
Yeah, especially since, hey, if
Oh, he drew a Thirst for Knowledge, and
ooh,
Shuhei, of course, let that resolve. The funny thing is, if Paul does just draw 3 counterspells in a row, the Trinisphere may make it so Paul can win this game.
especially with the academy.
Yeah. It's not as out of reach as it might look, but it also looks very out of reach. All right, does this prompt response? No, it still does not. Shuhei is just not concerned about the ancestral, any of these cards.
What about a Crucible? No.
Nope.
But to be fair, Dak Faden can steal any of these, so Shuhei's got a way to deal with those.
Paul has 12 cards left in his library.
Yeah, it'll be I suspect it'll be over before that. Oh, Shuhei found an Oath of Druids, so he can play that if he wants, but that's not going to happen. I really suspect that we're going to see Ancient Grudge on the Trinisphere now.
I feel like Ancient Grudge on Trinisphere is probably the best way for Shuhei to prevent himself from losing. Like, Trinisphere is what's restricting him from playing multiple spells in the same turn, and with Force, Mindbreak Trap, Shuhei's got a lot of counters.
Yeah.
I wonder what it would have looked like had Shuhei tried to go after Paul's card draw here.
And that's one of the things, though. It's like when you're dealing with like a Thoughtcast deck that has Thirst for Knowledge, also. I mean, and along with the restricted blue draw, it's tough.
All right, so Shuhei is going to lead with Mindbreak Trap, but you still have to pay 3 for that. He could also, so he's not mental misstepping the key. Interesting. He's going to use Force of Will.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, he can counter twice.
Yeah, Shuhei's got 2 counters. If Paul found enough counters, he could actually win this game. But his last set of draw steps, plus Ancestrals and Thirsts and whatnot, left him 1 counter short. Paul's very close to this.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think not getting rid of the Trinisphere was a dangerous for Shuhei. I mean, these pitch counters are great and all, but if you can only cast 2, the number 3 and 4 don't really do anything for you, especially when you're dealing with a Tolarian Academy and letting your opponent just resolve their draw spells. And like you said, if Paul had been 1 Force Will deeper into his deck, then he might have found a way to squeak out with a W. But as you can see, he's just got nothing left to play in his hand except for more Banefire fuel.
Yeah, more jewelry.
Yeah.
And this was the dangerous turn for Shuhei. After this turn, I think he's basically as close to lock as you can get.
Yeah, it would seem that way. And from this point, he can do a few things. So it looks like he's going to steal the Crucible and then start replaying lands, I guess.
Continue plussing Jason Paul.
Not nearly as effective, given that there is an Orchard token. So this is kind of interesting. Like he can't library, and he can only hard counter once. And Paul has a library, and there's a force of will. He was literally one card away.
Wow. Yeah, Paul had seen one more card. He actually would have won that.
That's
It's
incredible.
kind of brutal, especially since like Paul's down pretty low here in terms of resources. Also, Paul had to hold the match for quite a significant amount of time, and now he's on 3 minutes on his clock.
Yeah, and so this Orchard Token is going to start doing some work here. Like, which planeswalker do you attack? The one that's going to ultimate, or the one that's going to steal your time vault?
Looks like Paul attacked Dak.
Yeah.
He's the greatest thief in the multiverse. He stole a point of damage too.
Oh, and looks like Paul has two Force Wills. So if he can draw something,
So he drew force on his turn when he was a force away from winning last time.
Yeah.
Let's see. Taking a look at Paul's deck. He's got 2 copies of Voltaic Key. So if Paul can find the second key here, well, Shuhei
Not
still has enough mana out now that he can cast 3 spells in response.
yeah, it's. Do you think he kept any Goblin Welders in?
No,
Probably
I
not.
think against Oath of Druids, it's just too much of a liability.
Yeah. Remembering back to the classic Oath versus Control Slaver matchup that was
Yeah.
ever so popular back in 2006 ish. But Shuhei's starting to draw a little thinly here now. I mean, he's got Pyrite Spellbomb to deal with the Orchard Token if he wants to. He can also play Oath.
Well,
Or just
Shuhei has a Jace Ultimate ready to go now.
Yeah.
So it's the thing that I've been wanting to happen in coverage for a long time. That the game's actually going to come down to a Jace Ultimate. It wasn't even a Jace Prince Prodigy, unfortunately, but it's still a Jace Ultimate. I think that counts. Actually, Shuhei could go for it here. He could Ancient Grudge Trinisphere, and he can play Salvagers. He actually hasn't seen the Lodi yet. Is that correct? So
Yeah, I don't think so.
I guess
The
he
bad
doesn't have
thing,
the infinite combo yet.
I mean, Paul's got 2 Force of Wills, so if he wants to fight against this, he can.
Yeah. It looks like he did not.
Yeah, and that Salvagers is going to turn into a giant spider.
It's a good blocker, yeah, for that token.
It is.
Uh-oh, there's
Ooh.
Tezzeret. So Tezzeret plus double force. Wait, Shuhei only has 2 counters up. That he can.
Yeah.
Paul's actually. Is Paul gonna win here? He's gonna win with a Tezzeret ultimate.
Yeah, I think so.
This is what having heart gets you, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, this game has redeemed itself. The fact that Paul has millions of mana, he's got Slarian Academy plus Minamo School at Water's Edge. Shuhei letting Trinisphere stay and play long enough means that Paul actually has to play Tezzeret, force your force, untap my Time Vault, force your Ancient Grudge, take infinite turns, ultimate Tezzeret.
Woo! Yeah, I mean that's amazing. You're gonna have like a bunch of angry artifacts.
And the thing is, it doesn't even take very long. So he can actually just ultimate next turn. So the fact that Paul's low on clock isn't even going to come up here.
Oh, it doesn't. He's gonna be a little low on clock, but he's gonna quickly clock Shuhei for like
Yeah.
a million.
Yeah, just don't attack with the Trinisphere, because when it's tapped, it becomes dormant.
Yes. I'm not sure if
So
Paul knows that.
Shuhei doesn't even force will the Tezzeret. I guess Shuhei's going to go Ancient Grudge on your Time Vault, and then
We'll see some
try
fireworks.
to protect the Ancient Grudge here.
Yep, and he's only got 2. Can only play 2 spells. So it's either going to be Ancient Grudge Flashback, or just Ancient Grudge and Force of Will, and then Paul
Yeah.
has Force of Will, Force of Will.
Yeah, the Cage's
Yeah.
still stopping the flashback, but Shuhei's Force of Will just acts as the second spell. Dak Faden did not take that Time Vault, and Shuhei's actually paying for that now.
Yeah, it was a lot of interesting decisions that throughout over the course of this game, and it's just it seemed like getting rid of those artifacts is probably better, but Shuhei elected not to, and now it's come back to bite him.
I've never
Unfortunately,
seen a Jace activated that many times and have someone win. Paul won the game.
that's incredible.
That was it. That was the match.
Wow.
Paul's percentage to win stayed flat at like a 1% the whole time, but then all of a sudden like he just won the game.
Yeah. If when I asked for a good game three, I wasn't expecting nearly as much as we got. That was more than a match.
Yeah, that was unreal. So uh, that was about the best conclusion I can imagine. Paul Rietzl wins his match, advances to 2-0, and Shuhei falls to
Shuhei.
1-1.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
quite an interesting match, and it looks like up next we've got
Eric
Randy against.
Froelich. Yeah, we got Eric Froelich against Randy Buehler. We got Dredge against White Eldrazi, and we'll see if White Eldrazi actually has not been. It's a steady 2-3 right now. We'll see if the new deck on the scene ends up performing, but we're gonna find that out in a second here as we cut to some commercials, and we'll be back with Eric Froelich against Randy Buehler.
Yeah, wow.